Hello everyone, I just thought I would do what will hopefully be a brief video on reblooming Bougainvilleas. This particular Bougainvillea I've had for a few years. Also, I just want to, for the nomenclature freaks, some people say Bougainvillea, some people say Bougainvillea. Just relax. You know what I'm talking about. I've had this guy for several years, started from a little bitty sprout, and it's been training into a bonsai. And it's looking a little bit rough because I had to repot it because its pot broke. So I've been giving it several weeks here to kind of reestablish its roots, which in bonsai time, several weeks is nothing. Most of the time you give your bonsais a year to retrain their roots, but the pot's a similar size, so I don't think that's an issue. Yeah. But so that's why I have it over here in kind of the partial shade where it's also getting hit by my micro irrigation. I have too many things to water by hand, so I have everything set up on timers. Even my van does. So now that this Bougainvillea has started to produce its roots, it's filled in the pot, I think it's time to get this sucker to bloom. Some people, a lot of people, I think one of the more common issues I hear with this particular plant is that people buy them and then they're like, oh, it was in bloom, it was gorgeous when I bought it, then it lost its blooms and it hasn't bloomed for me since. So why is that? Well, here's why. At least up north, I'm mostly talking to people who live outside of the tropics here, or subtropics, north of zone probably 8 to 9B, somewhere in there, because there are several varieties of Bougainvillea, and they can grow over the place. Well, potted, that is. A lot of growers with Bougainvillea will take these guys and put them through a drought period, where they restrict the water for probably a couple months even, and then you start flooding it with water. You just water the hell out of it. As long as you don't want the water standing, they need excellent drainage, because these will rot on you very quickly if they're in standing water. But as long as you give them this drought period, some people call it drought stress, they will usually go ahead and set bud for you. Now, it's actually a lot more complicated than that, but when you think about where do these plants grow and flourish, where do you see them with tons of flowers all the time? Well, Southern California is a really good example of that. In Southern California, pretty dry during the summer, but then they get a few weeks of rain and then boom, fall, winter, and early spring, they bloom. They're native to Brazil, in an area where this is somewhat common for them. Most of these only bloom on new growth, so that's something to take into account. If you constantly are pruning it, that might limit your blooming as well. I haven't had that as a major issue with mine, and I mean, I have to prune this guy all the time because I am training it for bonsai. And you know, when you pinching, you just take these new growths up here and you just pop them off. That is where I think you'll run into more problems, where you're not going to get the long tussles of vinage happening, and then you're not going to get the new blooms. So where's another place that these grow really well? Well, South Florida and Central Florida, probably all over Florida, but I know in Southern Florida, during the winter time, there are just Bougainvillea blooms everywhere, and it's just beautiful down there. And that is in part due to cooling temperatures and rainy weather. If you keep these in a pot, you can control that and give them conditions they need to really get going. So give them full sun, I'd say a minimum 5 hours a day. Do not over-fertilize with an all-purpose fertilizer, at least. You know, if you're going to fertilize and you want them to bloom, give them sun and a blooming fertilizer. Sometimes that's not enough. So what I do is I take mine and I move it to a spot where my micro irrigation, my drippers won't hit it. Oops. Huh, there goes my hose. Okay, so resolve that little issue. Move them to a spot where your sprinklers aren't going to hit them all the time, and allow them to drought, if you will. I still water them a tiny bit, because what you're trying to do is you don't want to deprive them completely of water, although people do that. And I've done that in the past, and they'll lose all their leaves and just look horrible for a while. And then you jump in and start watering it very, very heavily. And then, boom, a profusion of flowers, and it looks wonderful. I think that's a little more stress than I like to give them, because I don't want to risk killing them. And once they drop their leaves, you gotta worry about the potential of death setting in. So I just reduce their watering extremely. So this isn't going to be on a scheduled watering like everything else is that has the micro irrigation, the drip emitters on them. This will be under my control for when it gets watered. I'll probably water it maybe once or twice a week, depending on the heat, and it's just going to be a tiny bit. I'm going to withhold watering to the point that the leaves start to wilt a little bit. I'll probably do this for 2 or 3 weeks. 4 to 6 is ideal, but this time of year, I don't really have the time window to do that because fall and winter is around the corner. So I'm going to do this for 2 to 3 weeks, shorter than I normally would, and then just put it back where it's going to get watered regularly. I'll water it regularly, and I'm going to give it a bloom fertilizer after it's been out of the drought period for about a week. I'll start fertilizing with a bloom fertilizer. I don't want to do it too soon because you risk damaging the roots that have been dry for a long time. Or at least, you want to give it a good heavy watering and then a bloom fertilizer, which might be what I do because sometimes we get impatient with our plants. Okay, so this is where I'm going to be keeping the Bougainvillea now for the next few weeks. Not much watering happens over here unless I do it myself. And I would prefer to do this video in a fashion where I save this filming right here and then come back to it a few weeks later and put it all in one piece when this is starting to at least bud to show that it works. However, other northern gardeners like myself, in 3 or 4 weeks, it's going to be too late for other people to try this if you have it in a pot. So I'm going to go ahead and just put this out now and then do an update in a few weeks. So anybody else who's trying to do this, let me know how it works for you and stay updated. That's all.